Boss people, good day. Hope you're having a fine one. We are on the precipice of a huge earnings week for Palantir, Rocket Lab, many other companies in which I follow, and you guys follow me for, to hear my thoughts, whether or not they're right or not. But I have thoughts, and so because you guys have awarded me such a platform to be able to discuss them, I feel obligated in which to update you guys on those thoughts. So, hope you guys are having a phenomenal week as I get my makeup and lighting appropriate. Today we're talking Rocket Lab. We're also going to have Rocket Lab Weekly, so hope to see you guys on there. But prior to that, I wanted to give a little bit more of a deep down dive. I'm sure we'll have Scotto, we'll have Vince, we'll have Dave potentially. Dave's been moving, so we haven't heard much from Dave as of late, but hopefully we'll still be able to see him for some time. Hopefully he can dedicate some time to us next week as we get prepared for earnings. But with that, I don't want to speak on behalf of him. I wanted to go through some of the key topics that I believe we'll be able to go through, give everyone kind of a rundown as what has happened in the organization since January, and some things that might not necessarily impact the bottom line or top line when it comes to news, but at least is to be noted. There's several key things here in the April timeframe, and I want to dive deep on those as well. And then obviously the financial aspect of things. What do I think is going to happen? What have they guided for? And etc. So all in all, it's going to be a very, very, I think, long call. Generally speaking, these calls are very long. There's a lot of great questions. I don't mean that in a bad way. And then coupling that with how Pete and Adam really show up when it comes to explaining what's going on in the organization and the foundational contracts that are being put in place now for the future of their organization is absolutely phenomenal. It's a college class on its own, and so I recommend anybody that's curious as to what's going on in the company, why they should potentially look at the company in terms of an investment, and also how capable and ability to execute from this organization is even on the table comparatively to say some of the other competitors out there, and why Rocket Lab is truly ahead in comparison to most of those companies, and why they've launched 63 successful vehicles, 60 Electrons, 3 Haste, uh, and continued success on the Haste front as well. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but overall, it's a college class. So let's just get right into it. Let me shrink my screen a little bit and hopefully give you guys an opportunity to. Oh, I shrunk the wrong screen on OBS. So give me a second. There we go. Here we go. 6-7 years of doing this, and I'm still effing up. So let's put this in slideshow mode. I don't have the right to use the appropriate colors and logo and everything like that. So as much as I would love to beautify this, I do that enough at my own job, PowerPoint engineering. And so with this, I'm just going to put it on a black and white, right? And hopefully you guys will still get the messages as you see fit. So key topics. Sorry, it's a light. It's bright white screen, so apologies as I get my eyes get adjusted here. Update on Neutron, obviously key milestones, right? So we've had a couple tank tests and things of the like, and there's still a lot to remain when it comes to what we need to be able to get onto the pad in late 3Q, early 4Q. It's kind of where my mind is at right now. Obviously, we still need to do some static fire tests of the Archimedes combined with the tanks. So stage 1, stage 2, and then a fully integrated test, meaning getting everything all put together, stage 1, stage 2s together. Luckily, I think stage 2 and stage 1 are like almost completely separate, right? They're not like integrated. I don't know. I might be speaking out of ignorance here, but it's like stage 2 fits inside of stage 1. So like stage 1 is kind of its own entity. Stage 2 is kind of its own entity versus like a Falcon 9. Stage 2 sits on atop of stage 1, so they kind of need to be, tested. But regardless, we do have that hippopotamus mouth, which is, in my opinion, kind of been shown up as showing up and working. Whether or not it's been actually verified, I guess, is another piece of it. But obviously, I'm anticipating integrated tests, FAA allowance, and a few other things happening in the second quarter. I'm sure we'll hear about the things that happened in the first quarter, tank testing for stage 1 and 2, etc. but there's still plenty of stuff to go. Obviously, I'm kind of forecasting a late 2Q, early 3Q. Maybe not obviously, but that's what it says on the screen. So if you're reading along with me, you'll kind of get that kind of vibe. And from there, I think you'll have 2 to 3 months. So if you're able to get an early 3Q at the latest, I'm thinking for an integrated test on the pad, etc., to be able to test out some of those Archimedes engines, which has yet to be qualified from what I've seen yet. So maybe we'll hear, in this particular call that it will be qualified. Who knows? But I have yet to see it on X or anything like that. Um, so if that's the case, then I'm anticipating a late 3Q, early 4Q launch within 2025. You obviously had some really good news with the NSSL and VADR contracts coming through. Those are key contracts for Neutron for potential revenue in the future, and they kind of have indefinite quantity, an infinite budget, indefinite quantity, um, in terms of how much they can launch, and then they have the opportunity to compete with SpaceX and Blue Origin for the NSSL contracts, and then you also had updates on Victus Haze as well, a key milestone associated with, does this look appropriate? Let me give people some context about Victus Haze. That's a 24-hour contract turnaround. Sorry, not contract turnaround, but a contract for a 24-hour turnaround on being able to launch a haste-like vessel. Might actually be Electron. I don't know. I have to double check. But basically, 24-hour turnaround to be able to launch a vessel for key contracts in the future, for the U.S. DoD, and I think some of that as well. They're not the only person to be undergoing sort of a Victus Haze sort of contract, so it'll be interesting to see if they get narrowed down, if they still are in the running, or have to split the contract amongst multiple people, etc. You had large updates in the quarter on Kratos. Obviously, we had those tests in 2023 and 2024 with respect to the haste missions. There's some finalization with respect to utilizing Kratos. To give some context on that a little bit, and this isn't my words. This is, Sir Peter Beck's and others. Apologies if I botch it, though. Basically, what I think Kratos and the Department of Defense are trying to do is eliminate legacy systems that have been used for hypersonic rocketry, and those currently at the moment cost anywhere between $50 million plus and have really unreliable launch cadence. And so that Kratos contract is really trying to shrink the cost of the hypersonic testing bed. And obviously, what we have seen so far is those haste missions cost around a $10 million range. So if that's the case, comparatively to 50 million, you're looking at about 20% of the price. And we've obviously seen 60 odd launches of the Electron vehicle, 3 of which have been for underneath the haste configuration. And so very solid movement in that place. And then we've seen in April, about 2 weeks ago, the UK expansion. I might leave this for a separate video, but if anybody's really curious, there's a huge opportunity set, and this is a question I've had with Peter in the past. I've had the pleasure of asking, and same with Adam. Asking them personally with respect to haste, the capability of launching that from other nations or other pads. Obviously, that might have implications of having to be U.S. based pads on different countries, or maybe it's just alliances that have to be signed. I think there's still some gray area with this that needs a little bit of confirmation in detail, but there is a huge amount of, well, not huge amounts, but there's details online about Australia, the United States, UK sharing hypersonic test beds to be able to help the security of our kind of alliance nations that we have with the United States. And so I'll leave that for a different conversation, but there's a lot of good information on that. And I dove a little bit deeper, maybe to give you guys a preview on that one. The EU is very reliant, likely, on this potential contract kind of coming forward and expanding. There are several others in terms of hypersonic opportunities, but they would not be ready until at least 2030 plus, more likely 2035. And most of them are still in the concept design phase. Nobody's actually started cutting steel, as I like to say, in the oil industry. So in that respect, I think there's huge implications with respect to this contract that hopefully likely have to be kept quiet, to be very honest, but at the same time, hopefully there's a little bit of information on it. Firefly launched the Blue Ghost to the lunar moon, or lunar lander to the moon. And with that, Rocket Lab provided them a lot of software, provided them a lot of other opportunities and kit on the Blue Ghost lunar lander. So hopefully there's learnings with that, and then coupling that with, you know, how do we show up, right? I think Rocket Lab was a backup in terms of being able to conduct the mission. Firefly obviously had a successful landing, and the rest is kind of history there. But at the end of the day, Rocket Lab is right there helping provide service and an opportunity for Firefly. If unfortunately things got a little bit of a awry, but everything turned out perfectly fine. I anticipate updates on Flatellite, Solero. They just had an update of kind of recreating and customizing some of your solar kits on satellites. So I anticipate we'll see much more on that. And there was a key milestone for the SDA contract as well. And so with that, I'm anticipating a little bit of update with that. Flatellite, I'm still curious whether or not they're going to keep that under wraps. I'm still also curious if they're going to utilize maybe not the first mission, but at least one or the second missions of the Neutron R&D flights, meaning the Rocket Lab fully funded flights, which I anticipate at the moment are potentially one or two, but it might be third or fourth, depending on if we and how we land the first Neutron or soft landed into the ocean, and then how the second landing goes. There might be a third or fourth sort of R&D test, which I'm perfectly fine with. I'd like to demonstrate the capability, just like Starship has been doing with SpaceX. I don't mind, spending the capital to test a new capability and make it more lean and efficient for the long term, as long as we maintain cost control, which we're talking about Rocket Lab here, right? So we're not talking about some spendthrift kind of company. These guys will know what they're doing. In terms of financials, which we'll touch a little bit more on in the future, I have a announcement or a forecast I'd like to make. If you guys were paying attention to the fourth quarter, the gap operating cash coming from the businesses that are actually operating, meaning the space systems, as well as the launch business, only lost about $2.5-3 million when it came to cash flow, right? Cash flow negative, meaning like basically from what they actually sold in terms of revenue versus what they actually got back in terms of cost. Sorry, what they sold in terms of revenue minus whatever they got in terms of cost of goods sold and actually operating that business. They were very close to being operating positive. Now, of course, you have to add in things like capital expenditure for free cash flow and share-based compensation and things like. But the underlying businesses themselves, I'm sure if you even remove out the Neutron business and what we're trying to do with the ramp up there, space systems in normal launch, meaning Electron and Haste, I believe at this point, are cash flow positive from an ops perspective. And so I think you'll have that announcement, and you'll kind of see we're either narrowly just there within $1 million or so, or we're actually going to be cash flow positive in those businesses. And it's only being dragged down at this point by Neutron and getting that to the pad and getting that up to speed. I think gross margins are going to exceed on an adjusted basis over 30%. We'll be in the mid 20s in terms of gap margins, as we have been. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you have to burden it with share-based compensation. All that being said, while ops cash will be positive for the operating businesses, Electron, Space Systems, etc., will still be negative from an EBITDA basis, obviously due to the share-based compensation piece and Neutron. But the free cash flow will remain also negative as well, due to the fact that we're ramping up and you have pad expenditures, you have testing expenditures associated with Neutron. There's just a lot going on right now. And so I anticipate not only that, but actually in the fourth quarter, there was really little cash burn. We'll talk about that maybe in just a moment, but there was like $24 million in cash burn quarter over quarter from the third quarter to the fourth quarter is very impressive. But I anticipate just with everything going on with Neutron, that'll grow to about 30%, or sorry, $30 million. Looking at revenue, I think this is a pretty simple story. We obviously did have some really good launches, but we also had a lot of I think, deliveries when it comes to space systems. So while I think you'll see an increase in launch, we had 5 launches in the quarter. I'm assuming $8 million or so. While the average sales price is increasing closer to 9 million, the current backlog is still in the high sevens, low eights. So I'm anticipating right now $8 million per launch. We had 5 launches in the quarter, so that'll give us about $40 million. But like I stated, we had a lot of deliveries, I think, in the fourth quarter of last year, and so maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised. Maybe space systems revenue will stay rather flat. Um, but overall, I think it might take a slight hit. And so overall, I think we'll end up being down 6% to flat from the fourth quarter, which was about 125 million. The guidance from the company was 117 to 123 million. I think that wiggle room is obviously the sort of sales price that they might get from their space systems, which I think is very predictable, versus launch, which I anticipate on the downside. They were anticipating maybe 4 launches, but they got 5. So I'm anticipating we're going to be on the upper end or that of that range, the 123 million, or exceed. I think up to 125 million. I'd be pleasantly surprised if we get above 125. The business seems to be running right, so I don't think that there's a reason for a big step back. But in terms of quarter-over-quarter growth, but like I said, there was a big beginning of start to rolling out. So I think some of the vessels, as we have seen, so the global star vessels, kind of in the year of 2024. So whether or not that sort of revenue starts to come off as we kind of go through, and you start to get to the tail end of that, revenue would be lower realized than previously. But overall, if you look at the total revenue, and I think I have the mental notes as to how much it's up. I think it might only be quarter over quarter, so I might be misspeaking. But I can pull up my spreadsheet in the background. We're still going to be up 45% from the first quarter of last year. So 12 months ago, $93 million print. And you can kind of see there was about $32 million from launch, $60 million from space systems. So we're up about 33%, going from 60 million to 80 million in space systems, and about 25% going from 32 million-ish to 40 million. So overall, you're increasing pretty good overall if you stack everything kind of on top of each other. So really good news there when it comes to increasing overall revenues. Then if you look on a trailing 12 month, you'll see that on a launch cadence basis, we're up to $124 million on a trailing 12 months, which is up a pretty good bit. It's about 30% up from 85 million in the first quarter of last year. And then we're on a space systems basis at 331 million, almost 332 million. So I think overall we've surpassed now on a trailing 12-month basis $450 million in revenue. So that's up over 60%. I think, what is that? I'm not good with mathematics. You guys know that, but it's about 175 to 190 million in the prior year quarter. So being up to 450 million, that's pretty impressive. $282 million in the prior year quarter. So being up 450 million is very impressive, over 60% growth. And if you look specifically at launch went from 85 to 124. Space systems went from just under 200 million to over 331 million. So the majority of that growth coming from both segments, honestly. I mean, that's a pretty impressive lift of both. You have to think going from 85 to 124 is pretty expansive. That's almost a 50-60% growth on its own. And going from 197 or so to 330, that's north of 50% as well. So I mean, both really just hitting it out of the park. So no either one is really dragging on the other in that perspective. So to summarize, revenue down slightly in the sequential quarter, but strong growth in the prior year. And if you look at that graphic on the right, I mean, we're really absolutely killing it. And really, I think we should be expecting by the fourth quarter this year having an exit rate of $125 million a quarter easily. Hopefully towards the latter half of the year, ramping up closer to 150. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end the TTM trailing 12 months at north of $500 million, and hopefully getting closer to 550 to $600 million. So 600 million will be a stretch, right? But I would love 600 million in 2026. But I think you'll either have to launch a second Neutron vessel for commercial, and that's plausible. But I think it's a stretch for right now. As always, we do the revenue split by division. So the blue shows up as space systems as a percentage of revenue, and you can see that generally hovers around the 66 to 85% range, with an anomalous fourth quarter of 2021. And right now you can see that we're kind of hanging out flat, 72, 73%, 67%. So due to the 5 launches, and in my opinion, what potentially might be a slower space systems quarter compared to usual, we saw 2/3, 1/3 about in terms of the launch. So 67%, which I guess isn't too crazy, but yeah, I think that normally we would expect space systems to be a little bit higher, but I think we have a little bit of a pullback just due to a lull between 2 big satellite contracts, being the MDA Global Star sort of contract and the ramp up of getting deliveries out and ready for SDA. But I think that's partly offset by the fact that you have a growing solar business, and a growing reaction wheel business, which I'll leave the reaction wheel business to Scotto. He's the man when it comes to that. When it comes to cash and backlog, as I noted earlier, fourth quarter was very good in terms of cash burn. I think we might accelerate a little bit from that, but I think we'll drop to about $450 million in cash on hand. So it's about a $35 million cash burn as we ramp up activities for Neutron. That's just at least my prediction. I don't know anything inside or anything like that. But you did have some really good contracts starting to come through for the NSSL, for the VADR, for Victus Hayes was already on the books, but you also had Kratos come through in early in the quarter, in the first quarter. But you had some other things that you can't count on. So things like the UK haste expansion deal, that was in April, so you would not expect to see volumes or contract deals associated with that in the backlog for the first quarter. So I anticipate, I'm trying to run through things, man. There's just a lot of volume starting to come up and pick up, but without real, I guess, ability to put a number to the bottom line. So you hear things like $5 billion contract, $40-odd billion contract, like what we just saw with the UK hypersonic testbed deal. And what you can actually quantify directly to Rocket Lab gets very difficult. And as I noted, the UK deal will be something that has to be dealt with in the second quarter. But even still, like the NSSL and the VADR contracts, these are billion-dollar contracts, of which not everything is going to go to Rocket Lab. And keeping in mind that we also are generating $100 and some million in a single quarter. So you have to fully offset that before you're able to even add to the backlog. We've been steady at about $1 billion to $1.1 billion over the past year or so. I anticipate this is the quarter where we actually start to see a little bit of movement upwards. And I think a lot of that has to do with the NSSL, the VADR, the haste contracts coming from Kratos, which is billion-dollar contracts. So I think Rocket Lab's portion of that will really have them grow. And to be very honest, I did not put a lot of rigor into this number. It's really just me guesstimating. So I would not be surprised if Rocket Lab shows up and the contract value actually goes to 2 billion, or sorry, the backlog value actually goes to 2 billion. Like I said, I haven't put much effort into that, but what I do know is that they can't just add $5 billion for the the NSSL contract, right? I mean, you have the kind of thought process behind, like, not everybody is going to be able to call that $5 billion theirs. So how they actually quantify that on the books is beyond me, but I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity to see at least a movement from that 1.0 to $1.1 billion backlog that we've kind of been stuck at. And keep in mind, it's not like it's a stale backlog, right? I mean, that's still adding 100 to 150 million dollars a quarter, right? These guys are wheeling and dealing when it comes to getting business done. And so, really, I think at this point, this is hopefully a quarter that hasn't been seen in a little bit that really amps up that that actual backlog, because it's been a couple quarters since we've had a big movement, and I feel like the end of the fourth quarter to now, there's been a lot of conversations. So in terms of total value, sorry, not in total value, total slides that I wanted to share, that was really it. We can go to my spreadsheet quickly. It's where I house a lot of my material. Um, what else did I want to really show? Here's our old prediction of what I thought. So we're a little bit behind on that. I think 2025, I had about 750 million dollars. So we're behind on that. Understandable. I think I made this back when I first invested in the company. So give that a little bit of love and room. But anticipating margins to be really good. I'm trying to think what other things we can chit chat about. But I think that's the majority of it. I might have some other thoughts on Rocket Lab Weekly. As always, we do that on Saturdays in the evening, late afternoon. If you're in Europe, it's early morning on Sundays. Sorry, late late Sundays, late Saturdays, so you could watch it early Sunday. Trying to think if there's really anything else, man. I'm really just inspired by what the company's doing. Um, Love what they're doing. I'm by no means an expert, so hopefully you guys don't take everything I say verbatim, because obviously I'm just an enthusiast. By no means am I an expert. Just love what the company's doing. I love being a spectator of it, and from a business perspective, just love watching their sport play out. And I think that honestly, they're the best suited to keep going. In terms of backlog, they have plenty of backlog left. If they abandon, like it's easy. Like let's just say Neutron fails and fails miserably, which I do not think is going to happen. Like I stated earlier, from an ops cash perspective, their main businesses, I think, will get to a break even point this quarter. And within the next 6 quarters, I believe we will hit profitability on a group basis. So I think we're close. And even if you had to abandon Neutron, like I stated, those underlying businesses are getting to a place where the gross profit is starting to really show up. And with that, hopefully you can start to climb to the mid to high 30% range when it comes to adjusted gross margins, and start even getting into gap gross margins north of 30%. And so at that point, it's just a cadence problem with respect to launching Neutron and getting close to 450 to 500 million dollars worth of space systems equipment out on an annual basis. And by that point, you're definitely going to hit profitability. So anyway, I think it'll be an interesting next year or so, and I'm really looking forward to what they have to say, as always. So hopefully this quarter we can get a little bit of love and have the opportunity to talk with Sir Peter Beck and Adam once again. And I'm always very appreciative of their time. And I'd also love to talk to Frank as well, hear specifically what he's focusing on. Is he focusing on satellites? Is he focusing on launch? Is he focusing on? And so, yeah, I'm glad that he was able to join over the past 6 months to a year, and would really love to hear a little bit more from him as he's been able to onboard and really probably focus. So I'm very curious, right? He's obviously looking potentially at both sides of the business, but is he hyper focusing on one to really get gross margins and profitability out? So it'll be interesting to hear. And I know he took a sizable position in the company as well. So anyway, I've been rambling on for about 30 minutes. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you guys later today. And if not, I'll see you guys for earnings next week. Cheers.